Greetings to one and all, and I'm happy to talk to you tonight about Isis, the divine female. Please allow me a few minutes to refer to an exciting performing art project related to Our Lady Isis. It's a video that I have produced called Isis Rises Operetta. It is a 48 minutes long video. Isis Rise Operetta is a wordless musical operetta to cross all boundaries in the world. It relays the allegorical story of the trial, tribulation, tragedy, and triumph of Isis as the archetypal goddess of all women through acting, interpretive dancing, lyrical dancing, projection, and special light effects, all portrayed in an ancient Egyptian setting. The video comes with a supplementary book in any of 12 languages, which provides the background information and mystical meanings behind all of its aspects. The operetta is an Egyptian mystery play performance. This and similar mystery plays were performed in ancient times in conjunction with various and numerous public festivals. Okay, the operetta will help discover and empower the multitude of qualities of the goddess within. We are here to talk about Isis. We'll explain how Isis is the divine female principle as the source of creation, both metaphysically and physically, the relationship and oneness of the female and male principles, the numerology of Isis and Osiris, various manifestation of Isis as the universal female principle, the role of Isis ideology through the world. Let's begin first with the name of Isis. The present day common use of the name Isis is limited to her aspect of maternal devotion, fidelity, and tenderness. But she is much more than that. She represents the divine female principle that includes the creative power that conceived both physically and metaphysically and brought forth the living creatures. The ancient Egyptians looked at Isis as the symbol of the cosmic feminine principle. This principle encompasses thousands of feminine qualities and attributes. And the Egyptians have terms to describe each manifestation of this feminine principle. In the culture of the English-speaking peoples, and similarly in many Latin languages, a name is merely a label to distinguish someone or something from another. But for the Egyptians, both the ancient and the present silent majority in Egypt, a common name represents a resume or synopsis of the qualities and attributes of an entity. Egyptian common names are the attributes and the quality of any entity. This would be similar in the English language for words or names like carpenter or farmer, etc., or smith, which represent a specific activity. So we need to look at Egyptian names in the same regard, that they are really adjectives. They describe something. It is not just a label to distinguish one from the other. In the English language, we refer to her name as Isis. But the Egyptians had a representative term that recognized the totality of her cosmic feminine principle. This all-encompassing Egyptian word or term is Oset. So what is this ancient Egyptian name? Let's look at the meaning of Oset to demonstrate how a name represents qualities and attributes. The word Oset consists of two main words. Os and the suffix et. Os means the source, the power. In mathematics, we say 2 to the power of 2. The mathematical power is called os. The suffix et at the end is a feminine ending. In addition to os, meaning the source and the power, it also means the origin and the cause. In this regard, we will show Oset to be the source, the power, and cause of the created universe, inclusive of everything within the universe. Another interesting meaning for Oset is the lady. And indeed, she is the lady of heaven and earth. She represents the feminine principle in the universe. The principle manifests itself in different forms and ways. And therefore, Isis was called by the ancient Egyptian Isis of the 10,000 names, meaning 10,000 attributes. Another related meaning to the name Oset is the word seat. Isis is recognized as always wearing a seat or a throne on her head to symbolize her as the source of legitimacy, which is manifested in the ancient Egyptian adherence to matrilineal and matriarchal society. This topic will be discussed later. As we have noted, the use of the common name in the English language of Isis hinders our comprehension of valuable information, knowledge, and wisdom. However, to make it easier, we will continue to use the word Isis and other ancient Egyptian names familiar to English-speaking people and others who speak English. The role of Isis as the divine female principle in the creation process has been recognized by all. She exists everywhere, and she has been known to all since time immemorial. Plutarch made note of that in his Moralia, Volume 5. He states, quote, Isis is in fact the female principle of nature and is receptive of every form of generation, and by most people has been called by countless names, since because of the force of the reason, she turns herself to this thing or that, and is receptive to all manners of shapes and forms. The ancient Egyptians referred to her as Isis. Of the 10,000 names, attributes, in ancient Egyptian text, you find that she refers to Isis of the many names. There are so many manifestations of the female principle, and it will be better if you read more about them in my book, Isis, the Divine Female, where we learn about 15 female deities of goddesses, such as Maat, Sishet, Net or Neef, Nut, Nepthat, Setet, Taurat, Mut, Sichmut, Best, Kadish, Heket, Sirket, Anet, and Hathor. To appreciate the roles of Isis as the female principle of nature, we must find her primary cosmic role in the early sequence of the creation of the universe. With our limited time for this presentation, we will not be able to provide a complete supporting background of the ancient Egyptian creation process. For that, you may refer to a few of my books, but the most important one is Egyptian Cosmology, the third edition, and not earlier edition. There are first and second edition are still available in the market, but it is really the third edition, which is much more comprehensive. We should realize that there are no contradictory creation accounts in the Egyptian text. We must recognize that the Egyptian creation process manifests itself in variant ways. Please notice that I said variant. I didn't say varied. The creation process always starts from point zero, the nothingness, known as none. From the nothingness came the one, who is referred to in Egyptian text as Atom, which means, again, you got to go beyond a name. What does the name of the word mean? Atom means complete. All ancient Egyptian creation texts show an orderly creation sequence in the form of Atom, the complete one, emerging out of the pre-creation chaotic state of the nothingness, none. All ancient Egyptian creation texts also show how one state of being develops or emerges into the next state of being, and how every two consecutive stages are images of each other. Let's talk here, for example, about the beginning, none or the nothingness, and atom, the complete one. None, the nothingness, is number 0, and atom, the complete one, is number 1. And 1 means the all. So we have an image that goes from 0 to 1. To have a creation, we must have multiplication. Therefore, the original unity includes both the female and male principle, which are necessary to begin and continue the multiplications. Many people think of atom as being a male. Atom is not a male. Atom number 1 is both male and female. The first act of creation is to conceive. The ability to conceive, both mentally and physically, was naturally represented by the female principle, Isis, being the feminine side of atom unity. This was confirmed plainly in Plutarch writings. It is Isis, being the divine mind of intellect or divine intellectual principle, that begins the existence of polarity, complexity, and multiplicity. Multiplication leads us to talk about numerology. For the ancient Egyptians, numbers are names, applies to the functions and principles upon which the universe is created and maintained. We have atom as number 1. He is the totality of creation. His name means the complete one. And the female side of him will be the number 2, who is Isis. The universal number 2 is Isis, is the female principle, which symbolize the power of multiplicity. The female, mutable, receptacle, horizontal, representing the basis of everything. In the ancient Egyptian thinking, Isis as the number 2 is the first image of the divine intellect. So the ancient Egyptian papyrus, known as the Bremner Rhind Papyrus, which is housed presently in the British Museum, London, explains to us what is the plan of creation. Quote, "I conceived in my own heart, there came into being a vast number of forms of divine beings, as the forms of children and the forms of their children." Close quote. So the first step to start creation is to conceive. The concept of the multiple divine beings out of the one. The godmother Isis conceived the plan. She conceived the plan both metaphysically in her mind, in her loving heart. This is both eloquent and poetic, because the heart was, as is, considered to be the symbol of intellectual perception, consciousness, and moral courage. The ancient Egyptian text emphasize an orderly sequence of creation, which is basically a system of necessary emanation, procession, or irradiation, accompanied by necessary aspiration or reversion to the source. All the form and phases of existence flow from divinity, and all strive to return feathers to remain there. So next we'll talk about the universal number 3. The universal number 3, now with the plan of creation being conceived in the divine reason, the next logical step is to bring it to life. Therefore, Isis, the divine thinking, engenders a power appropriate to the realization of its thought. The bringing to life or animation of the creation plan is brought on by the all soul or universal soul of the all. The universal soul was represented in ancient Egypt by Osiris, the third in the sequence of creation, and the number 3 was communicated through him. Osiris is the eternal emanation and image of the second, the intellectual principle. Every stage of creation tends to engender an image of itself. It tends also to rejoin the next higher, of which it is itself a shadow or lower manifestation. For Isis is an image of the first principle, and her shadow is Osiris. How enlightening. Now, talking about Isis and Osiris and the atom will lead us to talk about the universal trinity and duality. As we have seen, it takes 3 components to create and bring something to life. So the prototype of generations encompass 3 elements of the creator trinity, which are represented in the briefest description as follows. The first is the one, the first existence, called atom by the Egyptian, the complete one, the one who is the all. The second is the feminine principle, called Isis, which contains the divine mind, or first thinker, or thought, the place of metaphysical as well as physical conception, the womb, the chamber, the entire universe. The third is the masculine, animated, lively, dynamic, energetic principle called Osiris, known as the universal soul. Now let's talk about the cosmic roles of Isis and Osiris. Here we'll show some manifestation of the interplay between the female and male principles of Isis and Osiris, such as the permanence of the female principle and temporal, changing, and cyclical male principle as applied to, number 1, the solar and lunar principles. Number 2, the 4 elements of creation. Number 3, the societal role of Isis and Osiris. The first topic here will be talking about the solar and lunar principle. But before we talk about that, let us clear something. Let's talk about Ra. Because wrongly so, Ra is known as being the sun for ancient Egyptian. This is absolutely incorrect, absolutely wrong. Ra is not the sun or solar principle. Ra represents the creative impulse, and therefore we find in the litany of Ra 75 of such manifestation. There are references to Ra'at, Ra'amun, Ra'atum, Ra'hurakhti, Ra'des, and Ra'des. There are no 75 manifestations of the sun because Ra represents the creative impulse and not the and not the solar principle. So Isis and Osiris and the sun as the solar and lunar principle. This interplay was very nicely written in ancient time by Diodorus of Sicily, who in his book 1:11, 5, verses 5 and 6 states, these two gods, meaning Isis and Osiris, they regulate the entire universe, giving both nourishment and increase to all things. Moreover, all practical matters, which is essential to the generation of all things, is furnished by these two gods, Isis and Osiris, symbolized by the sun and the moon. The sun, who is Isis, contributing the fiery element of the spirit. The moon, who is Osiris, represent the wet and the dry, and both together, the air. And it is through these elements that all things are engendered and are nourished. And he goes on with more details. So the archetypal model of solar and lunar principle is based on the fact that all aspects of the universe follow this criteria of an original and permanent female principle, and they're cyclical, changeable, and moving male principle. The female is the sun, the source of energy. And the male principle is the moon that manifests or reflects such energy. The moon moves around the sun. He goes all around. He is the masculine element. The one is moving. And Isis is the sun, the source of energy. She represents the permanence aspect of creation. Isis, now we go to Isis and Osiris and the 4 elements of creation. Of all the 4 elements of creation, earth, water, air, and fire, the element that is solid and permanent is earth. which is representative of Isis. Several of Isis' 10,000 names relate to her being Mother Earth. Egyptian texts write of Isis, the Queen of Earth. The texts also refer to her, Lady of the Solid Earth. The four elements of the word, water, fire, earth, and air, were described by Plutarch in his Moralia, Volume 5. And so we see while Isis, the defined female principle represent solid earth, the other three are representation of the changeable female principle. The other three are Osiris, represent the water, which comes and goes, rises during floods and high tide, and recedes and evaporates totally, disappearing to rise again in a new cycle. Horus represents the element of air, moving and shifting, which rises when it warms up and falls down when it cools down. And the fourth item is the fire or heat. A Seth represent the fire, moving and causing droughts. Now we talk about the last interplay between Isis and Osiris, which is the societal role of Isis and Osiris. As we stated, Isis represents the sun, and her husband Osiris represents the moon. The light of the sun, Osiris, is a reflection of the light of the sun. The ancient Egyptian societal and political system complies with the relationship between the sun being the female and the moon being the male. As a result, the societal political law was reflected in the Egyptian allegory of Osiris and Isis, where Osiris became the king or the pharaoh of Egypt as a result of him marrying Isis. Isis in Egyptian, as we stated, means the seat of the throne, and she is identified by having a seat or a throne in her head to provide the principle of legitimacy. It is therefore that Isis is always shown wearing that. And she is not just the woman behind the throne, as published in other places. In Egypt, the significance of Isis as the seat was the basis of for Egypt adoption of the matriarchal principle in their society. The role of the female principal Isis is shown in one of her 10,000 names. In many texts refer to her as the maker of the kings. Also refer to her who delivers the king his rank, without whom no king can exist. Throughout the Egyptian history, it was the queen who transmitted the soul or blood. Please, it was the queen who transmitted the soul or blood. The queen was the true sovereign, the landowner, keeper of the reality, and guardian of the lineage, purity. A man who married the eldest Egyptian princes claimed the right to the throne. Through marriage, she transmits the crown to her husband. He only acted as her executive agent. And it is therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that you'll find that there are references to dynasties, dynasty 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. Some dynasties maybe have 1 or 2 pharaohs. Other dynasties may have 20 pharaohs. And the only reason for one dynasty to end and another dynasty to begin is that the pharaoh did not have a daughter. If he does not have a daughter to transmit the solar blood, the dynasty ends. There was no bloodshed in the transmission from one dynasty to the other. The pharaohs, as well as the leaders of the smaller localities, adhere to that system. If the pharaoh or the leader had no daughters, a dynasty ended and a new dynasty began with a new revered maiden as a seed for a new dynasty. Matrilineal practices also applied to the whole society as a whole, as evident in the funerary stela, hundreds of them, of all kinds of people, where it is the usual custom to address the descent of the deceased to the mother's side and not on that of the father's side. The person's mother is specified, but not the father. Or if he is, it is incidentally mentioned. The tradition is still enduring secretly among the silent majority of Egypt outside the urban areas. Even in the English and practically all European languages, the multilinear principle is structured in their language because we say the word family. Etymologically, it is centered around the female, family. For the female is the heart of the family. Now, let's talk about, as we study Isis and her spread throughout the world, we'll talk about the Egyptian, the Christian holy families. The very thing that it is now called the Christian religion was already in existence in ancient Egypt, long before the adoption of the New Testament. The British Egyptologist Sir Wallace Budge wrote in his book, The Gods of the Egyptian, published in 1969, quote, "The new religion, Christianity, was breached there by Saint Mark and his immediate followers in all essentials so closely resembled that which was outcome of the worship of Osiris, Isis, and Horus." And he goes on with more details. The similarities noted by Budge and everyone who has compared the Egyptian Osiris, Isis, Horus allegory to the gospel story are striking. Both accounts are practically the same. For example, the supernatural conception. the divine birth, the struggles against the enemy in the wilderness, and the resurrection from the dead to eternal life. The main difference between the two versions is that the gospel tale is considered historical and a matter of fact, and the Osiris, Isis, Horus cycle is considered an allegory. The spiritual message of the ancient Egyptian allegory and the Christian revelation is exactly the same. Ancient Egyptian ideas and belief survived in Christianity, whereby Mary the Virgin assumed the attributes of Isis, the everlasting mother, and the babe Jesus assumed that of Horus. And let's talk more about the similarities between Mary and Isis. And even look closely at the word Mary. I said word, I didn't say name, because we're going again, as I began, we have to look at this name as the mean or represent, not as just mere label. So throughout ancient Egyptian text, Isis is called Mary Isis. The origin of the word Mary lies in ancient Egypt, where in the written form, it is written by two consonants, M and R. Okay, the vowels A and Y were added by modern scholars to help pronounce the ancient Egyptian words. The meaning of the word is the beloved. So the word Mary or Mary is one of the most repeated word in ancient Egyptian text. It was used as an adjective, an epithet, before the names of people, gods, etc. Likewise, we find that the name Mary is given to many women in the Bible. The two closest women to Jesus were called Mary, his mother, and Mary Magdalene. For both are, as per the meaning of the word Mary, beloved. And let us talk about Mary Isis, the cure-all. And finally, we'll present the role of Isis as the cure-all, showing how mankind is always seeking her aid. Isis, the female principle, is not only responsible for conceiving and bringing to life all forms of creation, but what the female principle Isis brought forth, she protects and cares for and feeds and nourishes, and she uses her power graciously and successfully for all those who seek her aid. Being the divine mother, she is the cure-all. The populace of Egypt looked upon Isis as the patroness whose solicitude extended over the entire range of human needs. To those in need, no other divine figure equaled the status of Isis, the Virgin Mother. Isis, as the queen of Osiris and mother of God Horus, and her loving care made her queen of heaven. Her protection was eagerly sought throughout Egypt and spread throughout the world. She became the great aide and mother who influenced and love pervaded all heaven and earth and the other world. And she became the personification of the great feminine creative power that conceived and brought both every living creature and thing, from deities to heaven, to men, to earth, even insects in the ground. She was the personification of all tilted lands, the Holy Spirit of the field, the goddess of harvest, and who she brought forth and protected and cared for and nourished everyone and everything. Throughout the book of the coming forth by day, which is mistakenly known as the Book of the Dead, Isis is spoken for as a giver of life and food for the dead. Her countless attributes inspired Egyptians and all others throughout the world. The Adors of Sicily describe her qualities. As for Isis, the Egyptians say that she was the discoverer of many health-giving drugs and was greatly versed in the science of healing. Consequently, she has attained immortalities. In the ancient Egyptian, this is a side note, in the ancient, Isis never dies, by the way. I continue what the Adors of Sicily says. Isis finds her greatest delight in the healing of mankind and gives aid in their sleep to those who call upon her, plainly manifesting both her very presence and her powers towards men who ask for her help. In proof of this, as they say, they advance not legend, but manifest facts, for practically the entire inhabited world is their witness in what is eagerly contribute to the honors of Isis, because she manifests herself in healings. For standing above the sick in their sleep, she gives them aid for diseases and works remarkable cures upon such as submit themselves to her. And many who have been despaired by their physicians because of the difficult nature of their malady are restored to health by her, while numbers who have altogether lost the use of their eyes, of some other parts of their body, whenever they turn for help, this goddess are restored to them, are restored to their previous condition. Furthermore, she discovered also the drug which she gave immortality, by means of which she not only raised from the dead her son Horus, and he goes on and on. If you find similarities between Isis and the Virgin, maybe because they are one and the same. For further information about related subjects, please check my main website, www.Egyptian Wisdom Center. This is one word, all lower cases, EgyptianWisdomCenter.org, where you will find over 100 free articles and the list of our books in 10 languages as well as other related activities that we have on the website. For the video about ISIS Rises Operetta and a supplementary book in any of 12 languages, please visit and order from our secure website, ISIS Rises Operetta. Again, one word, all lower cases, ISISRisesOperetta.com. Thank you for listening and have a great evening and day.